be prepared is half the victory. Miguel de Cervantes. The adventure begins before we even hit the water. When Kit and Lisa arrived at our house, Kit backed their canoe into our garage wall, crunching the bow of their brand new canoe. Luckily, we got it banged out and riveted back in place. But what a way to start an adventure. Paddling this upper section of the James River was great fun and beautiful. For Lisa and Kit, there was a definite thrill of discovering how a paddling adventure goes. Did I mention that this is their very first canoe adventure? We started the day on the Cowpasture River in Iron Gate, Virginia. The beginning of these adventures is always surreal. This trip, the feeling was enhanced for Lisa and Kit due to their absolute lack of canoeing experience. Hampton and I have the paddling know-how. Lisa and Kit have the primitive camping and packing skills. They have hiked the entire AT and biked the Transamerica Trail. Lisa and Kit followed our lead. Several times, Hampton and I wondered what we had gotten them into. We were on the cow pasture for about 3 miles before we hit the confluence. Kit was immediately surprised by how rough the ride was on the bottom of the canoe. Shallow water, head in rocks, and inexpert paddling all combined to whack their canoe around a great deal. Everyone's nerves settled as the day went on. It was a comfort to Lisa and Kit to have Hampton and I setting the course. We went through several sets of rapids, and no one died. It was a delightful and successful river run. We arrived at camp about 2:30 and immediately went about setting up camp. We had a snack, pumped water, set up the tents, and relaxed for a while. We then got out our brand new pocket rockets and made dinner. On the very first set of rapids today, the canoe hit a rock, swamped, and soaked all the contents and occupants. The really surprising thing is that it wasn't Kit and Lisa. Kit and Lisa did get sideways and caught on a rock. It looked like their baptism was at hand for several minutes as Kit tried to back them off the rock against a sideways current. Hampton and I had already cleared the rapid, but had turned around to try to offer assistance. Never turn your back on the river. As we were attempting to help, we were caught by a submerged rock and had to abandon ship to minimize the amount of water we were taking on. As always, we took this setback in good humor and chalked it up as part of the adventure. We found so much beautiful James River turquoise. Rita Breeden told us about this turquoise, but I had no idea what it really was until we saw her again at camp on day 3. She explained that these stones were formed from iron ore slag that was dumped into the river. Iron furnaces used to be located all along the James River and provided much of the iron used during the Civil War. To produce 1 ton of iron, the furnace required an exact recipe of 200 bushels of charcoal, 2 tons of iron ore, and 500 bushels of limestone, all of which would be lit and joined inside the furnace. It took 4 to 6 hours to produce molten iron with a layer of slag floating on top. The slag would be drained off, and the molten iron would be allowed to run down a narrow crevice in the sand into a corresponding and larger trench in the sand to cool into pig iron. The slag was returned to the river. The slag takes on different colors based on how it is produced. As we begin day 3, it is clear that Lisa and Kit are starting to get the hang of handling their canoe. We arrived at Buchanan around 10:45 this morning. Kit and Lisa needed to replace their paddles, so we had a quick stop at the Twin River Outfitters. We walked around the quaint little town and found a nice spot for lunch, the Wit Stop. After a fabulous meal, we headed to the ice cream shop. But there wasn't a lot of time to waste because thunderstorms are in the afternoon forecast. We had a super enjoyable 5 miles to camp along fast-flowing currents and rapids. We immediately established our camp, built a fire, and pumped water. We had a beautiful campsite in Arcadia, and like our other campsites, it is located very close to the CSX Transportation Railway. CSX is a Class 1 freight railway that carries about 1.1 million tons of coal a year. Grain is the second product most often shipped by rail. We saw trains almost every day of the trip. I hadn't thought of this before, but it now makes perfect sense. We heard and saw trains in the morning, at midday, in the evening, and at all hours of the night. This was a kind of cool unexpected addition to our trip. Watching a sunrise or sunset gives me a better sense of gratitude for the earth and all of its creatures. When I am caught up in the natural beauty of the earth, I can rid myself of distractions and feel higher levels of satisfaction and gratitude for what's happening all around me. We broke camp slightly slower this morning due to an increase in the time to prepare breakfast. Lisa and Kit are running low on stove gas, so we cooked our dinner and breakfast over a campfire. This is a wonderfully simple way to live. We launched our canoes around 7:30 and headed directly towards the stunning Blue Ridge Mountains. It's hard to explain how beautiful it is out here, even in moments of terror. We ran 17 more rapids today, and Lisa and Kit had 2 close calls. They had difficulty breaching an old dam and kept having to back up and try a new section until they finally found a chute. The second time, they hit a wave pool a little askew and got trapped against a rock. Kit jumped out of the canoe and pushed them free. Nature is definitely a part of the show. We had an eagle follow us down the river most of the morning. We have seen countless wildlife, including, but not limited to, merganser ducks, northern water snakes, slider turtles, blue herring, green herring, sunfish, smallmouth bass, grackles, goldfinches, snapping turtles, hawks, buzzards, stoneflies, salamanders, tadpoles, otters, geese, copperhead, crayfish, mink, wood ducks, and countless others. We arrived at camp around 12:30 and immediately had lunch. We headed back to the river and spent the afternoon swimming and laying in the sun. Now the sun is dropping and it's time for dinner. Man, do I miss my day job. Until this trip, I did not realize that there were common mergansers on the James River. They seem to enjoy swift-moving water and were often close to or in the rapids, making it hard to get good pictures of them. Common mergansers are often known as sawbills due to the serrated edges of their bills that help the birds grip their prey. Mergansers often fish in a group. They form a semicircle and drive the fish into shallow water where it is easily captured. They are known to form creches, with single females being observed with over 70 ducklings at a time. Today we finished the upper section of the James River. This 8 miles included a string of Class 2 and Class 3 rapids, culminating with Balcony Falls. We switched to 2-person rafts for this more challenging section. It was both exciting and strenuous. There were many places where we had to pull our way through boulder fields and over rock ledges barely covered with rushing water. Balcony Falls turned out to be just another Class 3 rapid today. We were over it before we realized it. After that, it was more boulder fields that slowly thinned out into the flat water of a lake created by the first dam that we've encountered. Today's paddle ends with us sliding under the Appalachian Trail footbridge across the James River. Wow, we have completed the entire upper James River. The feeling is surreal. I feel accomplished, joyful, and strong. I have enjoyed every moment of our trip so far, and while there are times that I am apprehensive of the things to come, I am excited about the next leg of our journey and what I have already and will accomplish. Mabel Foley, Hampton and Lisa's mom, came to pick us up from camp, and we have a no paddle day planned for tomorrow. It is time to head home. Primitive camping is fun, but we all need a shower. It also gives us a chance to reevaluate what we truly need and what is superfluous. I absolutely have to add flip-flops to my stash of supplies. We will have to skip the next 23 miles of the river because it is dammed 8 times in that distance. We will rejoin the river in Lynchburg on Friday. Today was our longest mileage day to date. It was also Lisa and Kit's 38th wedding anniversary. We paddled 20 miles and barely saw a house. We are deep in the middle of nowhere, and there is little to no cell phone coverage. Anyone who has enjoyed this type of adventure can tell you that weather always plays a role somewhere along the way. Our motto has always been, we will weather the weather, whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. Today required this positive attitude and then some. As usual, the paddling was beautiful and challenging. Clouds thickened and the winds picked up as the afternoon wore on. It became obvious that we were in a race with a thunderstorm to reach our destination and set up camp. We lost. It began to thunder about a mile before we could find a place to throw down our tents. It began to rain just as we brought the canoes to shore. It was raining too hard to set up our tents, so we huddled under umbrellas, ate a snack, and chatted. The rain slacked off a bit and allowed us the window of time we needed to set up camp. We piled into our tents and had another snack. There will be no hot meal tonight, but in exchange for that, we get to listen to the rhythm of the rain on our tent. It's magical. Well, it finally happened. Lisa and Kit got baptized in the unholy waters of the James. The score is now 1 swamping each. But let's start from the beginning, shall we? It rained all night, so the river was a few inches higher this morning. Fortunately, the rain stopped in time for us to be able to break camp and have breakfast under cloudy but dry skies. The clouds never went away today, and the wind was whipping up waves in our faces most of the paddle. At one point, we went through a rapid with waves much higher than our gunnels. Things were going smoothly, even with the persistent winds and on and off again rain, until we came to the final Class 2 rapid of the day. Lisa and Kit approached the rapid slowly and made their plan for traversing the rocks, waves, and water. They had successfully completed their path when Lisa said they needed to go left. Kit saw a rock on the left, so he turned the boat to miss the rock. Halfway through the turn, he found himself in the air, followed quickly by the water. In the process of leaving the boat, he also managed to flip the canoe. Lisa was able to get out, catch the boat, and hold it against a rock until Kit could catch up and help drag it ashore. Once safe from the immediate danger, Kit tried to ascertain what had happened. When Lisa said they needed to turn left, she was looking not at the rock, but at a tree limb, chest high and sticking out from the shore, known as a sweeper. When Kit turned the boat, he inadvertently turned himself into the limb. Luckily, his life vest took some of the blow. Oh well, mistakes are a part of learning something new. With the canoe trapped against the bank, they were able to unload it. This lightened it enough that they were able to lift one side to spill out the water it had taken on. They then reloaded and headed on their way, a little bruised, but far more experienced. We slept in this morning because it was cold and rainy. We are staying at the Happy Rock Bed and Breakfast in Gladstone. They provided an incredible spread for a breakfast, so we had a leisurely meal and spent a few hours just hanging out. Our host showed up at 10:30 to take us to the river. We were back on the water by 11. We launched into 52 degrees and cloudy skies, but the weather steadily improved throughout the afternoon. It was a perfect day on the river. We made it through the rapids with aplomb. There were long, relaxing stretches of fast-flowing but flat surface. The mountains are slowly fading away as we enter the Piedmont section of the river. We had a great fried chicken lunch provided by the folks at Happy Rock. We sat on the shore and ate our fill. Not long after lunch, we reached the confluence of the Ty and James River. The James is starting to grow quickly now. A little ways downriver, we had to maneuver around the remnants of the old Tye River Dam. It was the most difficult thing that we had to do today, and it wasn't that hard. Tonight, we are on the second floor of the Howardsville General Store, with full bellies, ice cream in the freezer, and smiles on our faces. We left the B&B this morning at 8:30 and launched the canoes an hour later into a beautiful river under a bright blue sky. The James River is so much more than what I was expecting. We are somewhere south of Charlottesville, and at times the river is starting to look a bit more like the river I know and love in Chesapeake. As soon as you start to relax, however, another rock garden or strong rapid pops up. So much beauty everywhere. We had a flock of geese fly right past us, and a beaver swim beside us. At times today, the water looked like a mirror. At other times, it looked impassable. All in all, a great day for paddling and being thankful.
As the river slows and widens, we have fewer rapids to run. This offers us all a chance to enjoy the river in a different way. The belted kingfishers have been putting on quite a show, and I have been able to capture some of their antics in photos. Since the river is not pushing us quite so fast, we can also paddle from one side of the river to the other if something catches our interest. Often we will hear things that intrigue us well before we can see them. Today we heard a lot of birds making a ruckus. Turns out a red-tailed hawk was raiding an oriole's nest, but it was not just the orioles that were responding. Lots of small birds were dive-bombing the hawk, but it was still able to make off with an oriole chick. We arrived in Scottsville by 12:45. We had a wonderful afternoon with family and friends, and we are taking tomorrow off as a day of rest. We all need it. We are staying with my cousin Tim and his wife Kathy. They have been amazing hosts, and we cannot thank them enough. I'm pretty sure when they agreed to this, they never imagined that we would actually make it this far. Thanks for taking us in. Staying with Tim and Kathy was like staying at a bird sanctuary. I had the opportunity to see so many birds and other wildlife in the time that we were there. What more could I ask for? Good food, a great bed, family, and the chance to take some spectacular pictures. This was an amazing way to spend a no-paddle day. My Uncle Wayne and Aunt Tempe were also a huge help to us. They came to the river, picked us up, took us, our boats, and all of our gear to Tim's house, and then returned us to the river. They also let us use their truck while we were in town. We launched the canoes from the Scottsville boat ramp at 7:42 under questionable weather. We were concerned about the possibility of strong storms, and we had a long 20-mile paddle planned for the day. We humped it for 4 miles in the first hour and never looked back. The weather slowly improved, and we were making great time. The water was relatively smooth, with a few rock gardens to work through. We came to an island and were in the middle of traversing a long and dense rock garden when we heard rushing water. This was one of those times that you need a few more seconds to make it to the chute than you actually have. I yelled to Hampton that we were in trouble. Paddle hard. We managed to get the nose of the canoe into the chute just as a rock slammed into the right side of the canoe. But Hampton managed to get the back end to swing around, and we just barely scraped through. We tried to warn Kit and Lisa, but alas, they followed us right into the same situation. They didn't make it. One moment, their canoe was trapped against the rock. The next, it was flipped. Lisa disappeared under the water. I lost a few years off my life. Then she popped up on the other side of the canoe. It all ended well, but goodness knows I could have done without this experience.
What a remarkable comeback bald eagles have made. Daily we witness the conservation success story of the breeding bald eagle population on the James River, where 46 years ago, in 1975, they were locally extinct or extirpated. Their comeback began in 1979 and 1980, when a single pair came back and had a successful breeding season. Today, over 340 pairs of resident bald eagles call the James River watershed home, making it the site of the greatest comeback of the bald eagle in the entire North American continent.
We made it to Boatwright Island without further incidents and well before the rain. We are definitely in the middle of nowhere. We haven't seen a soul all day. Once we decide on a campsite, I run through my now new routine. Set up camp, go for a swim, explore, take lots of pictures, eat lots of carbs and not feel guilty about it, sleep with the gentle sounds of nature. I'm loving every moment. We weathered the storms last night in our tent. We had to sleep in an extra hour this morning while the storm played itself out, so we didn't launch until 9. This late launch is an example of how you just roll with the weather on this kind of adventure. I know when we get home, people will ask us how we enjoyed ourselves in all of the rain. The truth is that the rain has not affected our enjoyment of the river. We have shifted our schedule for the day a bit to work around the storms. It hardly ever truly rains all day. Storms come and go, just like in life. We paddled steady all morning on plate glass water. We moved along at about 4 miles per hour and were about halfway by the time we stopped for lunch. Shortly after our lunch break, we arrived at Cartersville. We pulled our canoes out and walked into a great little town. The village was full of beautiful houses, and the general store was crazy cool. Small town America still rocks. The owner of the store gave us a ride back to the canoes, and we met some great people at the boat ramp. And then we paddled on to our next camp on another island in the middle of the James. Today is day 15 of our river trip. We have become accustomed to the many sounds of the river habitat. Last night we had bullfrogs serenade us all night. Daily we listened to the raucous calls of kingfishers and the haunting calls of red-tailed hawks, among others. But today we heard something that made us stop and say, "What in the world is that?" That turned out to be a blue herring rookery. What a cacophony. But once we figured it out and got to see all of the hatchlings standing in their nest, it was awe-inspiring, something that I, even with years of living on the river as a child, had never before witnessed.
Often the call of a red-tailed hawk will be used by film production companies in place of a bald eagle's call, because even though they are much smaller, red-tailed hawks sound more aggressive.
I am a nature freak, but my day job requires me to be indoors, inside an office, and with people 8 hours a day. This doesn't sit well with someone who starts to wilt after just a few hours indoors. Well before forest bathing was a thing, and certainly before research confirmed the benefits of spending time in nature, like many others, I've known instinctively that nature is good for me. I know that nature energizes and centers me, makes me complete. Camping, canoeing, and hiking are some of the ways I have discovered of getting back to that happy little girl that I used to be. This island, in addition to the camping, offered me the chance to observe wildlife and capture my memories with pictures, another one of my passions. My time here was short but truly magical. This was by far my favorite camping site. Today, we reached Richmond. It was an extremely hot day, and I am both excited and exhausted. We left our island this morning by 8 and stopped only once for lunch on a small island. There was a goose sitting on our eggs 10 feet away as we ate our lunch. She pretended we didn't see her, and we pretended it was true. We continued our paddle into Richmond and quickly reached a long section of deep, flat water with much less current. There were suddenly big boats everywhere, enjoying the river in every way imaginable. This is great for them, but dangerous for us. The wakes could easily swamp us if we are careless. Fortunately, we make it safely to our destination. Mabel met us at Robia's boat landing. We loaded up our canoes and headed for the Commonwealth Hotel. Pure luck had us stay at a posh hotel within walking distance of our whitewater rafting pickup location and just across the street from the Capitol. What a welcome change from sleeping in a tent to sleeping on a down pillow. This stunning mural is on the top floor of the hotel as you exit the elevator. There are murals on every floor, but this one is my favorite. This morning, we walked to the designated meeting area for a 4-hour rafting trip.
James River Blues. I just heard the awful news. I could steer around the rocks, but they're busting down the dock. James River Blues.
Canoeing the Richmond Falls was never really an option for us. There are several Class 3 and 4 rapids, plus fish ladders and pipelines. Not things I'm ready to tackle alone. Our guides, Jen and Rachel, made this a fantastic trip, and it was nice to have someone else figuring out where the boat needed to be. All I had to do was follow directions, so this trip was really relaxing, and for the first time we all spent the day together in the same boat. We even got to jump off a rope swing and enjoy lunch on a large boulder in the river. I can't explain how much fun this was. Everyone should be heading out for this trip. It was fantastic.
The James River runs right through the capital city of Virginia, giving it one of its nicknames, the River City. Richmond is one of the few cities where you can raft or kayak on natural Class 3 and 4 rapids in an urban environment. Because the rapids are complements of Mother Nature, their level depends on the day's water level. The largest rapids are on the lower James River, including the Class 3 and 4 Hollywood Rapids, named not for that famous movie neighborhood in Los Angeles, but rather for the historic 19th century cemetery that got its name from all of the holly trees on the property. Prepare for a few spectators as you navigate these rapids, as they are located directly in front of Belle Island, one of the most popular hangout spots in town.
After the James River falls, the river becomes tidal. The river below Richmond has its own schedule. We no longer get to paddle when we feel like it. The river is now totally in control. It gets to decide what time we wake and how swiftly we must paddle to the next destination. The term tidal will quickly become a new curse word for us. The outgoing tide started at 4 a.m. It's an entirely different game now. We launched at 5:15 this morning, just as the sun was coming up. We have left the Piedmont and entered the Tidewater. Today's destination is Deep Bottom Landing. GPS said we were 7 miles away as the crow flies
when we launched at the 14th Street Bridge.
Unfortunately, the James River is not a crow. It meanders south for many miles, leaving us as much as 12 miles away from our destination 2 hours later. Today, we again ran into some noises on the river and slowed down to try and figure out what was going on. Turned out to be a fight, a raccoon fight, 2 against 1, with the 2 tag teaming against the 1. It honestly looked as if they intended to drown him. I couldn't help myself, and we started paddling in their direction. This action was enough to send the 2 bullies scurrying for cover. The underdog looks back as if to say thank you. As we saw our first tugboat rounding the bend, it appeared to take up the entire river. We decided that it might be best to take a break and headed to the shore. It seemed so big compared to our little boats, but tugs don't pull a lot of wake, actually less than a speedboat. So we would have been fine, but better safe than sorry until you know, and truthfully any excuse for a break on a hot day is a good one. The trip ended up being 18 miles of very difficult paddling into a strong headwind. Fortunately, there was lots to see along our way today. Countless eagles, osprey, herons, and other critters kept us entertained and happy. Also, because 3 of us are getting closer to home, we are starting to pass well-known landmarks. We passed under the iconic 295 bridge today. I have looked down at the James River many times from that bridge. One of my best friends and my college roommate, Jan McMillan, met us on her paddleboard about a mile before our destination. We are staying at her house the next 2 nights. She piled us into her truck and whisked us away to paradise. Time to eat and enjoy happy times with good friends. We woke up at 3:45 to enable us to launch before dawn. We wanted to catch as much of the outgoing tide as possible. We pushed off into the pre-dawn light at 5:25. A few minutes later, the sunlight exploded all around us. There were eagles and ospreys flying everywhere, glowing a soft orange reflecting the light of the early sun. What a special gift to experience and a wonderful way to start our day. Paddling in the tidal section of the James River is proving to be a challenge. The rowing effort is enormous, and the heat has been rough. Even so, the adventure continues to be amazing. We have seen at least 50 bald eagles today. It is still a sight that stirs my soul. At one point, we had 10 eagles circling our canoes. Our friends, Jan and Jeff, are hosting us again tonight, so she paddled out to meet us again today. We loaded up the canoes and headed to Charles City Grill for lunch. I crashed into a long nap as soon as we got back to her house. I just got up, showered, and shared another wonderful meal with our friends. As grace was being given before the meal, I thought of all the things I'm thankful for besides the food. I'm living a life full of adventure and pleasure. I am truly blessed. We spent last night going over tide charts and weather predictions. It is really important to pay close attention to the weather when you're in a small boat on a very big river. At some points, the river is 5 miles wide. The high tides were at 2:30 a.m. or 1:30 p.m., the former being too early, and the latter coincided with predicted heavy rain, wind, lightning, and flash floods. After several hours of low-level debate and consternation about what we should do, I hit upon the plan that we eventually executed. Low tide at our final destination, the Chickahominy River Front Park, was at 9:30 a.m. This meant the only way to cover the section of the river with both a favorable tide and decent weather was to start at our destination and paddle back to Lawrence Lewis. Not the original plan, but what the James decided we must do. We slept in until 6 and got up and had a leisurely breakfast. Jan gave us a ride to the Chickahominy River campground, and we pushed off into a slack tide and a light wind at 8:40. This confluence of the James and the Chickahominy River makes for a huge body of water. It is somewhat intimidating in a canoe, but as soon as our paddles hit the water, a familiar peace settles over me. We paddled through an enchanted cypress forest, ablaze with acres and acres of blooming pickerel weed. This section of the James twists and turns back on itself. The distance from start to finish in a straight line is 12 miles, but it is over 18 on the river. We paddled for 6 hours to reach our destination.
Our arms are about to give out with about 3 miles to go, but we are too stubborn to quit now. We could see the goal in the distance, so we buckled down and whined our way to the end of this wonderful journey. Lisa's good friend, Virginia, was there to pick us up. We loaded up the truck and headed back to Jan's house to pick up all of our stuff. We are headed once again to the Charles City Grill for the final dinner of our trip. What an amazing journey. The James is an incredible river. This trip is over, but the adventure never really ends. I have been asked several times what I learned while on the river, and what I would like to share is that whether you are like myself and immensely enjoy the natural world, or instead you enjoy the city, the crush of humanity, and architecture, there is one thing that we all have in common. We all depend on natural resources. A third of all Virginians rely on the James River in some form. 2.7 million people obtain their water from the James, making it Virginia's largest source of drinking water. 4.6 million pounds of commercial fish and shellfish were landed from the James in 2020. I could go on and on about the river's attributes, but what I have discovered is that the James was at one time considered to be one of the most polluted rivers in North America. And despite investments to improve water quality, the river's health score dropped a point in 2020, now scoring a 61% or a B-. While things are looking up for some species, such as the bald eagle, the American shad has fallen to an alarming 0%. Smallmouth bass numbers are also on the decline. Please consider taking steps to ensure the health and vitality of Virginia's longest river and the river that runs through the heart of our capital. Reach out to the James River Association and become a James Changer. There are lots of ways to help, both big and small, to make the James River and Virginia better for all of us.